I have never worked with a team of people that is as talented and as committed and as gifted and called as the group that serve here together at Riverbend Church. And today I want to introduce you to one of our senior staff members who you may not have a chance to know. His name is Pastor Kevin Hedges, and Kevin is our pastor of creative arts. And what you may not know about Kevin is in the years of his misspent youth, he wanted to be a rock and roll musician. He wanted to play music and pick up chicks and cause a lot of trouble. And that's what he did in the years before God got a hold of his life and redeemed him and eventually brought him here to be with us. But what you may not know, because Kevin is such a spectacular pastor, is that he's also a very gifted musician. And so what I wanted to do today, since we're talking about time signatures, is I wanted to invite Professor Hedges to give us a little music theory class. So would you welcome Pastor Kevin Hedges, our music professor for the morning? We're kind of calling this Hedges and Haney School of Music. So, really? That was what you wanted to do?
I'm still working on it. It's a little
okay. Yeah, it's rough around the edges, but it's not getting any better. But I want to ask Kevin about time signatures. What in music? What is a time signature? What does it do?
Time signatures are a way to kind of organize the music. We have, of course, melody and harmony, but we also need a way to kind of know the beats and the pulses, the way it's divided up, especially for reading and being organized with a band and everything else.
So everybody's kind of following the same rhythm.
Yeah.
So the composer chooses a time signature. So give us some examples of how different time signatures sound.
And a composer is aware that we're used to certain things. There's certain rhythms that we're used to. And so he's going to use these as tools in his toolbox to kind of bring about emotion and feelings. We're all used to waltzes. That's 3/4. The emphasis is on the 2 and the 3 of the beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that feels old timey, right? But there's rock and pop songs that still use it today. So we have. 1, 2, 3.
That was Piano Man, in case you didn't know.
A buck.
So that was 3/4, right?
That's 3/4, yeah.
So what's another time signature?
We're all used to 4/4. 4/4 is even called common time. Most of the songs that we sing are 4/4. It's going to have a feeling of a 1, 2, 3, 4. It's what we dance to often. Of course, we dance to waltzes, but 4/4 is going to be songs like.
That was Hey Jude, right?
That was Hey Jude.
Okay,
yeah.
well, I
Good.
was a little confused there.
We've got other time signatures like 5/4. 5/4 is very odd. We're not used to hearing or dealing with 5/4. It's got an emphasis on the 4 and the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So that's 5/4.
That's 5/4.
So what would be a really unusual time signature for a song that we wouldn't?
5 is pretty odd, but as far as pop music or rock music, the one that I think gets away with the most, you should know this song, I hope so. This is in 7/4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Anybody know that song? Money by
Pink Floyd, yeah, okay. So So I know that in your musical pursuits, for a while, you were actually scoring film scores. So how does a time signature work when there's a story being told? How do you, as a composer, match the music to the story?
Well, it's pretty complex. Again, a composer, whether they're doing pop rock music or classical or anything else, is using pitch and melody and rhythm to bring about emotion and do these different things. But when a composer has to get into film work, there's different rules, different things happening. The editor and the director have taken chunks of the story and made it this long. And sometimes a piece of music might fit in there with the same meter. It might work. You might be able to put a song in there. But when it comes to action scenes especially, you're going to have trouble with that fitting in there. And especially when you have punches and swords and different things happening, all of a sudden this time is chopped up into different hits. The rhythm is different. So you have to compensate that for that. So your best composers out there are now film composers because they know how to make that all work. You have a 2-3, or a 2-4, then a 4-4, then a 5-4, because things are going to hit differently. And it takes a lot of work, a lot of challenge. In the old days, they used stopwatches and a lot of math to figure it out. Now we have computers to say, this is happening here, 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 make it all fit.
So we want to show them an example of this.
Great example of taking a piece of music that has to fit within whatever the story's doing, not a piece of music that's already been pre-written. So here we go.
You seem a decent fellow. I hate to kill you.
You seem a decent fellow. I hate to die.
Begin. You're using Bonetti's defense against me, huh?
I thought it fitting, considering the rocky terrain.
Naturally. You must expect me to attack with Capaferro.
Naturally. But I find that Tybalt cancels out Capaferro. Don't you?
Unless the enemy has a study, he's a Grippa. Which I have. You are wonderful.
Thank you. I've worked hard to become so.
I admit it, you are better than I am.
Then why are you smiling?
Because I know something you don't know.
And what is that?
I am not left-handed.
You're amazing.
I ought to be after 20 years. Oh, there's something I ought to tell you.
Tell me. I'm not left-handed either.
So what we're saying is that, you notice how the music and the story are connected. So a composer would write the rhythms to fit the story that's being told.
Correct. Yeah. And the
So-
editor and the director are making those decisions ahead of time. Gotta fit
But
it.
there's a master composer who understands the rhythm of the story and fits those rhythms to the story that's being written.
Correct.
Story that's being written. So the metaphor then becomes, can you thank Professor Kevin Edges for most expensive sermon ever. The metaphor that I want to wear thin today is the metaphor of the composer, the metaphor of the time signatures. That we live in a world that has rhythms, and those rhythms change. And the question isn't, do those rhythms change? The question is, do we trust the composer of those rhythms? Today we wrap up a conversation we've been having for the last 7 weeks about the challenges of change. And I want to share with you today a conclusion that I have come to, and it is a difficult conclusion. It's a conclusion that will make many of you uncomfortable, and it makes me uncomfortable. But I believe it is the conclusion of the lesson of the challenges of change for from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. But before we talk about that, would you pray with me? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight, and that you would use your word spoken by your servant and anointed by your Spirit to challenge us to have the courage, not just to embrace change, but to move with it and to trust you as the great composer. Pray that for myself and for my family, for all of us here. For I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, Eugene Peterson's translation of the Message. There's an opportune time to do things, a right time for everything on the earth. A right time for birth and another for death. A right time to plant and another to reap. A right time to kill and another to heal. A right time to destroy and another to construct. A right time to cry and another to laugh. A right time to lament and another to cheer. A right time to make love and another to abstain. A right time to embrace and another to part. A right time to search and another to count your losses. A right time to hold on and another to let go. A right time to rip out and another to mend. A right time to shut up and another to speak up. A right time to love and another to hate. A right time to wage war and another to make peace. 7 weeks ago, we began a consideration of the challenges of change based on the poem that we have preserved for us in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And the conclusion of the poem, and the conclusion that any of us would make in life, is that change is inevitable. Change may be unwanted, it may be uninvited, but it is absolutely unavoidable. The only thing that we can be certain will never change is that everything will eventually change. The question isn't, will we experience change in our life? The question is, how will we handle it? What will our attitude be in it? And so we've been considering the wisdom of the wisest man who ever lived, the man who had a God-given gift for understanding. His name was Solomon. And Solomon was an interesting study. He was a young man born in unprecedented prosperity. He was not only born into the role of a prince, he was the 10th son of the greatest king of all of Israel. He was the 10th son of David, King David. And he was born in the middle of a century and a half of peace and prosperity in the land of Israel. Their neighbors to the south, the Egyptians, were suffering in a 200-year recession. The young Assyrian Empire had yet to establish any kind of influence. And for over a century and a half, the nation of Israel lived in great peace and prosperity. And Solomon was born as a prince in that time and that season of great prosperity. He was born with every advantage, every opportunity. He was born with every possibility. There was probably no one who ever said no to Solomon in his entire life. He lived with a sense of entitlement and privilege that not a single one of us could ever rival, no matter how successful or famous or accomplished we may be. He was a remarkable man, born in remarkable times and given almost unlimited opportunities. But not only did he have this amazing environment and the amazing circumstances provided for him, he was also chosen by God. In 2 Samuel chapter 12, it tells us that the prophet of Israel, his name was Nathan, had come to David, King David, Solomon's father, after his birth. David had named his son Solomon. It comes from the Hebrew word shalom. His name literally means of peace, or the peaceful one. And Nathan told David and his wife Bathsheba that they were to name him Jedediah. And Jedediah means beloved of Yahweh. It was an amazing thing to recognize that this young boy, born in every opportunity, with every privilege, was now identified as one of God's chosen. It was later in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 2, after Solomon was about to become the king of Israel, that he had a dream. And in that dream, the Lord came to him, and the Lord said, ask whatever you wish, and I will grant it for you. Can you imagine that? God saying, "Ooh, what do you want? What do you want? Just name it, and I will give it to you." Well, famously, Solomon asked for an understanding heart. He asked for wisdom, that he might be a wise ruler over God's people. And it tells us that the Lord was pleased that Solomon asked for wisdom. Here was a man who had every opportunity, who had every advantage. He had God's favor. He had unlimited, virtually supernatural intelligence and insight, discernment, and wisdom. And he came to the end of his life, and he recorded everything that he had learned in the book of Ecclesiastes. What we've been looking at is the wisdom that Solomon shares with us in poetic form in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. 7 weeks ago, I suggested that the intentional structure of these verses was to create one of the beautiful features of Hebrew poetry, which is a form of parallelism, so that one word defines and helps us understand the other. And so they kind of run in parallel. And I suggested, counter to thousands of years of exegetical scholarship, that what Solomon was doing was not using antithetical parallelism to contrast ideas or experiences or changes in our life, but he was in fact using synonymous parallelism, where each verse broke down into 2 stanzas. And the first verb and the third verb and the second verb and the fourth verb were complementary, synonymous. And so I suggested, in the face of all of the exegetical evidence of thousands of years of Semitic and Hebrew scholars, that I was right. I boldly, arrogantly proposed to you that we understand Ecclesiastes chapter 3 in a way that most people would say is foolishness. Now, you went along with it because you said, all right, well, let's see where this takes us. Well, it has taken us to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 8. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 8 says, there is a time for love and a time for hate, a time for war and a time for peace. And if you apply Dave's exegetical theory that has worked through 6 verses, we come to the 7th verse and we find that there is a time to love war and a time to hate peace. I know some of you are sitting there going, aha, we knew this was foolishness. We knew you were in over your head, contradicting thousands of years of Hebrew scholarship. And so I doubled down. I said, what can this possibly mean? And I thought for a moment, maybe it's a chiastic structure. Maybe he switches it up in the last verse, and the first and the third and the second and the fourth go together, so that love goes with peace and hate goes with war. That seems to make sense, doesn't it? But when is the time for hate? When is there time for hate? When is the time when you're supposed to have any encouragement or enthusiasm for war? It just didn't add up. It didn't add up because I thought maybe what this means is, in a time of war, this is the time for love. Because in a time of war, if you are living in a time of war, there's no greater message than a message of love, but that doesn't carry over to the second couplet, because then in a time of peace is a time for hate. So I thought maybe it's the preposition. Maybe in the Hebrew you can translate what we have as to or for with the word of, so that maybe what it's saying is, there is a time of love and a time of hate. There's a time of war and a time of peace. Maybe what Solomon is reminding us is that there are times that are beyond our design, that are unwanted and uninvited. There are times of love, but there are also times of hate. I don't know about you, but I see a world that embraces hate way too easily. If you study the history of humanity, you would be hard-pressed to find any time in human history, go back to 10,000 years BC, you would be hard-pressed to find a time when there was not a sign of people at war with one another. Not just on a global scale, if you break it down to a tribal scale or neighbor against neighbor, if you took it at the individual level, there perhaps has never been a day in human history when there hasn't been some kind of fighting or strife or some kind of war. So maybe what it's saying is in the extremes of life, love and hate, war and peace, this is the changes that we have to adapt to. But either way, it seems that my whole theory is scuttled. My whole exegetical prowess is burned on the trash heap of Dave doesn't know what he's talking about. Because for the first 6 verses, it seems like we had it figured out. The words complemented each other. The words followed one another. We understood one from the other. It was a beautiful study. And now we come to the final verse and we go off the reservation. The thing comes off the rails. All of our understanding falls apart. But maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe Solomon, in all of his wisdom, showed us a rhythm that is reliable, showed us insights that are trustworthy. But at the very end, he said, but wait. Just when you think you have it hardwired, just when you think you have the system down, just when you imagine that you have put God into a box, just when you think that you worship a manageable deity who works on a contract that says, if I say this, or I do this, or I believe this, then this is the change that will happen. Just when I thought maybe I understood the rhythms and I could control and manage my life and the rhythms of my life if I just did the math right, Solomon says, oh, no. You worship a God that is beyond your understanding. You worship a God who colors outside of the lines. You worship a God who refuses to be put into a box. And so there is a time of love and a time of hate and a time of war and a time of peace. And the master composer writes his composition as he sees fit to the story he wants to tell. So that it's up to us, not just to understand and not just to know, but to trust. See, Solomon's story is a case study. It's a study in the power of grace. The study of Solomon's life is a study of a child who was born into great privilege with every opportunity, with every advantage. And yet he was a man who lost his way. He was a man who made alliances with foreign gods. He was a man who tolerated inconsistency even in his own life. He was a man who literally had hundreds of lovers, perhaps thousands. He had countless children. He had financially mismanaged and misappropriated the wealth of his nation. He was a man who struggled to live consistently. He was a man who had been given everything, including the limits of human knowledge. He had been given every opportunity, he had been given every blessing and every advantage, and he got to the end of his life. After the intrigue that put him in power, it wasn't like he was in line to become the king of Israel. He was the 10th son. And according to the rights of the heirs, he had brothers in front of him who he eliminated. He had murdered his political rivals. He had done everything to establish himself and take advantage of the power and use his knowledge and wisdom to the full extent. And he got to the end of his life with all of this privilege and all of these accomplishments and all of this knowledge. And he said, it's not enough. Just as he comes to the end of this poem and he writes a verse that is out of sequence, that doesn't fit with the ones that had gone before, as if to intentionally remind us, hey, It's not about how smart you are. It's not about how much you know. Because when you come to the limits of the extent of your understanding, what you are left with is trust. Solomon put it this way as he concludes Ecclesiastes chapter 3. He says, but in the end, does it really make a difference what anyone does? I've had a good look at what God has given us to do. Busy work mostly. True, God made everything beautiful in itself and in its time, but he's left us in the dark, so we can never know what God is up to, whether he's coming or going. I've decided that there is nothing better to do than go ahead and have a good time and get the most we can out of life. That's it. Eat, drink, and make the most of your job. It is God's gift. Change is inevitable. It is unavoidable, even when it is uninvited and unwanted. And the uncomfortable truth that I have come to realize is that it's not about how much I know, but about how much I trust that matters. Do I trust the composer? Am I willing to move with the rhythms of his composition? Or am I going to move against them? Am I going to trust that he is gracious and loving when it is beyond my understanding? This is that uncomfortable conclusion that I've come to. I know there are some of you who are thinking that I came to some other kind of uncomfortable conclusion. Every week of this series, I've had somebody come up to me and say, Dave, are you setting us up? Are you leaving? No, I'm not leaving. But I can tell you what I am doing is I am abandoning myself to the grace and the trust of the rhythm of God. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what the rhythms are that are laid out ahead of me, but I will make every effort to follow his composition. This is how I handle the challenge of change. Not just by what I know, but what I trust and who I trust. You know, the concertmaster, the great concertmaster, probably said it better than anyone. In his last hours on earth, as he prayed in the garden, he said, not my will be done, but yours. He was saying, it's not what I know, but it's who I trust. It's uncomfortable for us, and perhaps we would say exactly what that other great theologian once said. His name is Inigo Montoya. And Inigo Montoya said, who are you? I must know.
Oh, there's something I ought to tell you.
Tell me. I'm not left-handed either.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay?
So, Professor Hedges,
Yes, sir.
film scores, music that moves with the story. So we've seen some examples of that, but how do we experience different time signatures? Is there, can we do Amazing Grace in different time
Sure.
signatures? So what is it written in?
We need people to sing along with us, all right?
Well, wait,
So
where's Carlton Dillard?
you all know that
Where's
this
Carlton?
is in 3/4.
Were you
That's
expecting us to
3/4.
sing
1,
along with
2,
that?
3. Yeah.
You expecting me to lead us
I heard
to
some
sing?
singing. I heard a couple singing out there.
Yeah, but
We're gonna sing it in 4/4 now. So one.
where's Dillard? Carlton, come out here. Carlton, I need your help. I'm not going to lead these people in singing. Come on. We're doing Amazing Grace. We just did it in 4/4. So that was 4/4.
That's 4/4.
This is 4/4.
Yes.
So how does it
Don't
sound?
you feel it? Feel it. 3, 4, 1.
So we want to sing it.
3.
How do we sing
Okay,
it?
we're going to sing it together. Here we go, from the top. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me, and so forth. That's 4/4.
Okay. So if we were to do it in another, like Kevin had suggested, 5/4. 5/4. So Carlton, come out here and show
What?
us.
I don't
how to
know
sing
about
this in
this one.
5/4.
You just sort of have to stumble on the 5th beat, okay? It's sort of like if you had too much to drink on the 5th beat. Oh, yeah, there comes the next beat. But anyway, we'll try it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound I saved a wretch. Forget it. This song was never meant to be in 5/4. God has ordained.
Can you thank Professor Carlton Diller and Professor Kevin Hedges?
Thank you, Kevin.
You know, there's a point where a metaphor just breaks down. Well, maybe it didn't. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is that when our life gets out of rhythm, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't mean that that's not what the composer intended. So as we consider the challenges of change, remember to trust the composer. Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, I would ask that as we venture through life and the seasons and the rhythms of life, that we would abandon ourselves to your composition, that we would sing with all of our might and follow your lead, and that as you conduct our lives and the story of them, that we would find you to be trustworthy. Pray for the courage to do that, not just for myself, but for my family, for all of us here. For I ask this in Jesus' name.